Hi everyone and welcome to week 2 of our Discoveries unit. So today we are looking at an article that was written for the Guardian newspaper, and it talks about a group of boys who were found on an island. So there was no one else on this island, just them. Now this article sort of draws on facts from a novel called Lord of the Flies. So we will be looking at both of these texts. First of all, Lord of the Flies, and then applying that knowledge to the article. Our focus this week is on punctuation, so we're going to be looking at using a range of this punctuation and using it accurately. Now, with these PowerPoints, it is important to point out that you can pause them, you can rewind them if you've missed something, or if I really am rambling on, maybe even fast forward. So before we start on the work from the booklet, it's just important to sort of talk about what is Lord of the Flies. So as I said, this is a novel. It is fictional, which means that it did not happen. So it was written in the 1950s by William Golding. So that was just after the Second World War had happened, and he wanted to sort of draw out that all men could be evil. So that gives you sort of a clue of the kind of ending and what's going to happen in this book. It focuses on a group of British schoolboys who have been stranded on an uninhabited island. So that means that they were the first ones there. There was no one else there. So that's why it kind of fits in with this unit that we're doing on discoveries. And it's about their disastrous attempt to govern themselves. So this word govern, we're thinking about how they made rules or how they failed to make those rules and have a sort of civilization. So because of this disastrous attempt, tensions rise between the boys and they start to disagree because they have different priorities. So this leads to violence, savagery, awful behaviour and chaos in general on the island. So now we have a bit of background on Lord of the Flies, we can prepare to read this article. So the first activity in this task is to watch the YouTube video that is linked in the booklet, which is only sort of 10 minutes long and gives a really nice summary of Lord of the Flies, which will give you the themes, the main characters. Now, if you would like to make notes while watching this video, then do feel free. However, the second activity, which is a gap fill, does sort of summarise the key points that you will need for this entire booklet. Once you have done that, you need to sort of decide whether you think the article that we're about to read, which the title of is The Real Lord of the Flies, do you think that this is going to be a similar story or a different story to the one that I have just talked about and the video that you've just watched was about? I would recommend that you just write 2 or 3 sentences on this and back up your reasons why. The last activity in this task is looking at where the story from this article is set. Okay, so these boys were found on an island which was part of the country of Tonga. Okay, so you can see here on this map that red dot is where Tonga is, and it is a country which is made up of many, many small islands in the South Pacific Ocean. So you can see where Australia and New Zealand are, that it is miles out to sea from both of those countries. So basically it's in the middle of nowhere. So why do you think that this is important, and how is it comparable to Lord of the Flies? Why do you think the author of this article has actually made that comparison to Lord of the Flies? What is similar? Okay. Do you think that many people live on this island given its location? Again, just a summary of what you expect and what you think for task 4 of this activity. Now you are ready to read the article. Okay, so I've linked the full article if you would like it. However, I have then condensed it So it's only 2 pages long for you to read and get the kind of full idea. So when you're reading, it is important to be thinking about, is this similar or is this different to the novel that I've just learnt about? And also looking at vocabulary, that if there's anything that comes up that you don't understand, go away and look that up. Okay, you can just make a note of this. You don't need to prove to us that you have done that. So I've just taken the first 2 paragraphs of the article to try and show you what I mean by reading with purpose. Okay, so for centuries, Western culture has been filled by the idea that humans are selfish creatures. So I've just drawn out the word selfish there, and I'm thinking, well, yeah, that is quite similar to what Golding tried to portray through Lord of the Flies, that the boys were selfish and they weren't willing to compromise. So I would say that's quite similar. We can see this in films and novels, history books and scientific research. But, and you'll see that I've underlined but as well. So this is showing that there's a contrast about to happen. They're about to contradict what they've just said. So, but in the last 20 years, something extraordinary has happened. So here we're detecting the change, that maybe we're going to start seeing some differences. Scientists from all over the world have switched to a more hopeful view of mankind. So initially, when we saw that there were some similarities, we're now actually seeing some differences, because Lord of the Flies, the novel, definitely didn't see a hopeful view of mankind. The author then goes on to repeat the phrase hopeful view. So he's really kind of homing in on that idea that humans maybe aren't selfish creatures. Maybe we do have some kindness in us. Okay, later on he then says, this story never happened. It is not real life. And both of these are short, simple sentences that are really to the point, which to me sounds like he wants to make you realise that it's actually probably unrealistic and that boys wouldn't have descended into total savagery. So here you can start to see differences between the article and Golding's story. If you follow this sort of technique of drawing out language to back up the similarities or differences, the task at the end of the reading, where you identify 3 differences, should be much easier if you have done this throughout. Your third task is where we really start to look at punctuation. Remember that that was our focus for this week alongside our reading. So the first activity of this task, you need to identify examples of different punctuation and then consider the effects. So you already have an example written down for you in the booklet, but I'm just going to talk through another example so it is really clear what you need to do. So I've just picked a paragraph at random from the article and I have identified a semicolon, as you can see in that red circle. Now this isn't on the list of things that I've asked you to find, so I think this is a really easy way to give you an example without giving you an answer. So a semicolon I can see there, so I've identified it, but I now need to think of the effect. So if I look at the 2, if I call them phrases for now, either side, I have skies were fair, and then I also have only a mild breeze ruffled the calm sea. Now to see if something is a clause, you need to identify a verb, which is the 2 words I have underlined. So were is a verb because it is to be. So the skies were fair, it's describing what the skies were. And then ruffled, which is describing the movement of the breeze and what the breeze was doing. So remember, a verb is an action word. Something must be being done. Okay, so now I can see that they're clauses, but I can also see that they make sense on their own. So I could say skies were fair and add nothing else to that. So that could be a sentence on its own. And I can say the same thing for the second sentence too. So the semicolon joins these 2 sentences together because they are really closely related. So I wouldn't want to put a full stop there. I could, but because they're so closely related, because they're talking about the weather, a semicolon has been used instead. Okay, as I say, you don't have to identify a semicolon. Hopefully the ones that I've asked you to pick out and identify might be slightly easier to define. Your second task, I've given you a set of sentences which you need to go through and correct. So this might be putting in capital letters, putting in full stops, apostrophes, commas, anything like that, you need to put it in. Your third task is talking about the importance of punctuation. So this is just a short activity that you need to consider. Why do we need punctuation? Think how hard would reading become if we didn't have punctuation, if we didn't have a full stop to tell us to just stop and take a breather and carry on to the next sentence. How would we organise our writing? And your last activity is thinking about why would Golding use exclamation marks? So someone having read this book says that he uses loads of exclamation marks. It's your task to think why. Why would he do that? So think about what the effect of an exclamation mark is, first of all, and then think how does that relate to the story that we have just learned about. Finally, in task 4, you have been asked to describe a character. Now, if you did the work from last week and you thought that you created a really good character that you want to use again, by all means use that character. However, if you didn't quite manage the work last week, or if you would like to create a new one, that is absolutely fine. So just create a character, they can be whoever you want, and then you're going to write a paragraph about them using the punctuation that we have learnt about this week. Okay, so you can see that I've written an example. You will be able to do much better than this, I am sure. So you can see that I have circled the punctuation, or some of the punctuation that I have used. So if we look first of all, shakily, comma. Okay, so we're separating that adverb from the rest of the sentence. Then I have Sophia's legs. So I've used an apostrophe there because the legs belong to Sophia. So the apostrophe shows the possession of those legs. They led her up to the intimidating, comma, concrete steps. So I've separated my two adjectives with a comma. I then use some speech marks. Your name, comma, please, with a question mark to signal that there is a question being asked the unkempt man on reception. She replied with a falsely confident voice and made her way to the waiting area. To say she felt nervous would be an understatement. Semicolon. This was Sophia's first job interview. So again, these two sentences would make sense on their own. To say she felt nervous would be an understatement. Full stop. Capital letter. This was Sophia's first job interview. Easily they could be two sentences, but because they are so closely linked, because the fact that it's her first job interview might make her feel nervous, I've put a semicolon in there. If rejected, comma, her dreams would shatter, and an exclamation mark to emphasise the emotion that is going behind this. So I hope that that was helpful. If you do have any questions, do get in contact with your English teachers. Other than that, good luck and enjoy.